When Cosmic Skeptic makes a statement about rape, he is making a political statement. When Cosmic Skeptic makes a statement about slavery, he is very intentionally, in a very self-conscious, self-aware way, making a political statement. Step by step, statement by statement, in this way, he expresses his political philosophy. He lets us know what his aspirations are for the future of the vegan movement, for the future of the atheist movement, and for the future of his own career. When he tells you that he thinks it would be acceptable for someone to kill an animal and eat its flesh for the very small and indeed scientifically dubious health benefits that they believe they would derive from killing the animal and eating its flesh, that is an intentional political statement. And when he says that he thinks slavery would be justified by all the same criteria, by the pleasure, by the utility of owning slaves, when he says he thinks rape would be justified, these things should be taken seriously as political statements and not dismissed in the manner that we might overlook a racist comment made in anger, captured by security camera while someone is perhaps drunk at a nightclub, perhaps having a fight at a nightclub, perhaps in the middle of a dispute with the bouncer of a nightclub. This is not security camera footage.
I'm interested in asking about if morality is something that's evolved within us and was susceptible to similar arbitrariness. Is the fact that rape is wrong as arbitrary as the fact that we have 5 fingers instead of 6?
I don't think so, because I think, once again, rape causes suffering.
But then the fact that we experience suffering and the fact that we call that suffering is something that's evolved.
You're being too philosophical.
We could call something else.
Yeah. No, I mean, 6 fingers versus 4 fingers or 5 fingers is not a question where suffering arises.
I see. I'm just interested, biologically speaking, is there a good reason that we should have evolved to experience suffering in the way that we experience it?
Well, I've just said the reason for suffering is to teach the animal not to do again what is just done. Mm-hmm. That's the only answer I have to that.
Okay, well, I suppose we can allow our listeners to make of that what they will. You talk about moral evolution in most of the chapter. You give examples of where we've progressed as a society. How can we determine, because you do that in order to distinguish parts of our ethics that come from our evolutionary history and parts of our ethics that come from society. How can we distinguish and identify which parts of our ethical conduct come from our biology and which come from society?
It's a bestiality. It's pretty disgusting and wrong. And I was like, well, I mean, instinctively I want to say yes, and they say, but if you have sex with an animal, there's at least a chance that they might enjoy it, you know? and maybe they do. I mean, it's a good chance that they're probably having a good time, or at least it's a pleasurable experience to an extent.
This conversation has taken a turn, but anyway.
I'd love you to do that as a routine at a woke comedy club. That'd be fucking brilliant.
No, but like, this is the thing, right? The eyebrows go to the back of the head, and then you say, but think about this, right? Like, when it comes to like slaughtering and killing an animal, that's obviously not in their best interest. They're obviously not enjoying that kind of thing. So it's like, it was an argument from kind of saying, like, if we're allowed to literally take a cow, put a bolt through its brain, turn it upside down, slit its throat and watch it bleed out, then that's just fine and no one cares. But as soon as you put your penis in it, oh, that's a big ruckus. Like, and I was like, that's a really good point. Now, luckily, I'm able to go the one way of saying neither of those things should be done. But I think as a meat eater, these are the kind of absurdities that you have to start considering. Like, what else can that kind of justification allow you to do? The kind of justification that we produce that we desperately kind of clamber for when we're trying to continue eating our burgers and our milk and our eggs, those justifications, you want to be careful with them because they can lead you to a whole host of really unfruitful places, I think.
So how many meat-free days a week do you reckon you can have if you want to have sex with a cow once a week?
Do a little hedonic calculus.
Yeah.
That may seem like a rather silly joke made at the very end of that clip, but if you are taking Cosmic Skeptic's political philosophy seriously, it's not, because he is someone who believes in the sum, the tally of pleasure, of utility. He is someone who believes that you can look at the aggregate amount of enjoyment in the universe and that you can do harm in order to justify an increase in this total aggregate enjoyment. I am someone who says these things do not add up. You cannot have a sum or a tally of good or evil. You can neither add them together nor subtract one from the other. But this is someone who subscribes to and is trying to promulgate and perpetuate the philosophy of Peter Singer that goes so far as to say it's acceptable to kill an animal so long as you replace it with another animal, and it's okay to kill a human being so long as you replace them with another. That is the conclusion. That is the perspective that this mentality of adding things up and subtracting them inevitably leads to. And it certainly is convenient if you're someone living at the center of the British Empire. It certainly must be reassuring to think that it doesn't particularly matter that your empire exterminated every single indigenous person in Tasmania because someone is enjoying themselves on the beaches of Tasmania now. Because when you add it all up, the total amount of pleasure and utility is the same whether it's one person or another living in Tasmania today in the long shadow cast by the history of the British Empire. The nature of this video may seem unforgivably insulting, unforgivably petty, unforgivably ad hominem, beginning with its title. But if you take a moment to read the text on screen here, this draws attention to something I'm not doing in this video, something I'm not doing in any of my videos. He and I may simply be two very different guys. We may not appreciate the same music. We may not have the same sense of style. We may be mutually alienated from one another on grounds that are more aesthetic than anything else. But in these videos, I'm not going after him with a hatchet this way. And what you see on screen here, if you take the time to read these comments, in the contrast between myself and this member of the audience, this really shows you the type of mean-spirited vilification he faces all of the time because of his perceived class status as someone who is neither unambiguously rich nor unambiguously poor. I'm certain that both Alex and I equally deal with this kind of comment that you see on your screen now. Hit pause, give yourself a chance to read it. It's especially ironic to face this particular kind of hostility from the audience when the two main topics under examination politically are atheism and veganism. Tell me something. What's more popular right now? The philosophy of cosmic skeptic or Islam? Tell me something. What's more popular in the world right now? The philosophy of cosmic skeptic or excuses for eating meat? The philosophy of meat eaters, however you want to put it. Both cosmic skeptic and I are advancing profoundly unpopular political philosophies. He and I have this in common. Indeed, there might be a kind of intellectual kinship between us in this one respect. I don't know if he accepts, as I do, that his philosophy will always be unpopular. That no matter how appealing he manages to make it seem, like no matter what packaging you manage to put on it, no matter how you present it to the audience, I don't know if he accepts that his philosophy will always be less popular than the mainstream religions, will always be less popular than the excuses for eating meat. Well, guess what? I do. I do accept that. And I don't live with some kind of delusion that a great enlightenment is about to come. There's a great awakening coming for humanity. And that just a few months or a few years from now, people will cease to be stupid, self-interested, and malevolent. That they will suddenly become ethically interested in doing the right thing just because it's the right thing to do, either in terms of the demolition of religion or in terms of the demolition of slaughterhouses. I notice that this person commenting from the audience does not defend any of the principles advanced by cosmic skeptic. If you remove the personality and simply deal with the principle, do you think what cosmic skeptic has to say about rape is actually more popular than what I have to say about rape? Ironically, in this case, in the instance of my conflict with cosmic skeptic, it's not merely the case that I'm right and he's wrong and it doesn't matter who would win the popularity contest. I'm right, he's wrong, and the edgelord game he's playing with ethics is in fact profoundly unpopular.
If I can't help falling in love with you.
There is a tradition in the popular modern Christianity of our time. A tradition that negative emotions like anger and hatred just exist for no good reason at all. Now, this doesn't come out of the Bible, doesn't come out of ancient Judaism. It's just a cultural tradition. As if hatred were something that should be suppressed, something you should deny that you experience, in the same way that for so many centuries Christians cultivated the attitude that homosexuals should live in a state of denial, as do the day-to-day lived experience of what it is to be homosexual, that they should deny that they have these desires, and then when they do feel them, suppress them. There is a cultural tradition in Buddhism, very much the same. There is a cultural tradition even among people with, I would say, Star Trek The Next Generation values. People who are atheists, watch a lot of science fiction. They have these notions partly linked to the fictional character of Dr. Spock. They have this notion that these emotions just exist for no good reason at all, and we would be better off without them whether or not that really was the moral to the story of the parable of Dr. Spock and his struggle with James Kirk or not, really it's a bit of a misinterpretation of the text. But without digressing into the esoteric question of the interpretation of Star Trek, allow me to say this. We experience emotions and we express emotions, not as an end in itself, but as a way to communicate something to our fellow human beings, whether that is laughter or weeping, whether we are expressing our own sense of consternation, confusion, sorrow, suffering, whether we are expressing something as simple as the fact that we need help, or something as complex as to say, if you push this any further, there are going to be serious consequences for us both. And within one culture and within one language, so much can be communicated by the look in your eye, by the tremolo in your voice, so on and so forth. We have these emotions and we express these emotions for a reason. In your case, in your life, it may not always be a good reason. It may be that you struggle with a sense of hatred, a sense of outrage, that when you reflect on it is baseless and counterproductive for your own life and for the people you're expressing yourself to. But from the misuse of a thing, there can be no valid inference drawn as to its proper use. I have had conversations with white Canadians. I have had conversations with white Australians in which they expressed opinions that were pro-genocide. And they were shocked, not so much at the content of my response, but at how openly angry I was, at the extent to which I openly and theatrically expressed my hatred for them. And that was what they questioned. They didn't reflect on the extent to which they were wrong and I was right. They didn't reflect on, in that moment, the extent to which they were expressing something just as evil as what the supporters of Adolf Hitler say, so on and so forth. No. They were simply astonished that I would display this emotion. And what I asked them was this: don't you get angry over a fucking parking ticket? Don't you pitch a fit when you find a parking ticket on your car and you think that's an injustice, or you feel that you did everything you could to obey the parking laws, but that some power beyond your control prevented you from getting back to your car in time? Don't you get angry over a parking ticket? Don't you get angry over the shoelaces that snap in a new pair of shoes that you bought just a few weeks ago? Don't you get angry? Don't you hate people over the most trivial things imaginable? Anger and hatred are emotions that we have for a reason that can be in your life just as good as the reasons we have for laughter and weeping. The moral of the story, whether it's the story of the Bible or the story of the Buddhist canon, or frankly, the story of Captain Kirk and Dr. Spock, is not that you should aspire to live your life like a robot, nor to do your public speaking in the lustless manner associated with mediocre university professors standing in their pulpit. Use your emotions. Don't let your emotions use you. If you're going to hate people, make sure it's for a good reason.